Hey everybody, Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here for Hope is Not a Tactic, the School Safety and Security Show. So one of the things I'm going to talk about today um, is violence in our schools. Now, there's a couple of things we should be aware of, and some things we can think of. So I have a list. I do threat assessments for schools, businesses, religious facilities, camps, any place that people gather. But we have a list of processes that we look at here, and it's a pretty big list. It's multiple pages, right? Multiple pages. I look when I go and do an assessment of a facility, I look at over 120 different areas of your facility, right? So that's not your simple review of your doors and your windows and things. And I don't put those down. If that's all you can get, then I suggest you get it. And a lot of us, we don't have a budget for that. I think we're foolish to not get a budget for a really good threat assessment, but some of us just don't have the budget. And you go to the local police, or you have somebody's dad in school who has some security background and they do it for it. It's better to get something than nothing. All right. But we're going to talk about some of this violence and one of the first things that we talk about when it comes to violence is there are internal threats and external threats. The internal threats are the people in our buildings, the ones we let in, students, staff, visitors, delivery people. We let them in. Come on in, right? And then there's the external threat. These are the people that show up that are not a part of our school community. We're not inviting them in the door, and they try and force their way in so they can do harm to us and our students and staff and visitors. And so one of the best ways we can keep our facility safe is to limit the number of places we let in. That's very simple. If you have a school building where there are, like at some high schools, there are multiple doors that are open in the morning. If you're going to have an open door and let people in, and I understand some of you have lots of students, you got to get lots of them in the building. But we don't always check backpacks, do we? We don't have metal detectors, so we're just kind of letting everybody in the door. And our number one attackers are internal threats. These are students in our schools, right? So we got a concern there. Right? So one of the things we can do is limit the number of doors that are open. And every door that's open should be monitored, right? That means you got to have a staff member there with a radio and an ability to call for help if they notice anything that's out of place. Now, there's lots of equipment out there that you can get. There's a particular piece of equipment called a view scan, VIEW scan. And what it does, it's a metal detector. It's a weapons detection system. It's not a metal detector. It doesn't work like a traditional metal detector, right? You can put it into the walls of the doorway so that nobody sees it. Because a lot of parents say, I don't want it to look like a prison and going through. You can put it in the walls. And as students or anybody comes through it, it can pick out where on the body it finds metal. And obviously metal is guns, knives, things like that. And it shows a picture of the person and a spot right where that metal is. Now that can be viewed by security in another room, and they can say, hey, stop the young man with the blue jacket and look in his right hip pocket. You see if you find a weapon. So that's good. There's lots of equipment out there. We're going to do a whole show on tons of equipment coming up. But like I said, the first thing you do is limit how people get in and out of your building. One entrance is the best. If you have to have two, that's okay. Make sure they're monitored by staff, and that staff has a radio to call for help and whatever. Now, if we remember some famous school shooting events where we had external threats attacking us, the Covenant School in Nashville, where the killer showed up at the school, fired a couple bullets through the glass. It was a vestibule. They had a man trap, shot through it, and the glass immediately dropped, and the killer was immediately in the school within seconds. The video is really devastating. You see how fast the killer was in the school. And they had a lot of equipment in place. They had a lot of training. Excuse me. But the problem was it was such a fast entry. Now, in school safety and security or any facility, we talk about time equals life. If you have time to see the danger coming at you, you have time to respond. If you have time to know that something bad is happening, you can lock down, you can flee, you can take other actions. If it's happening so quickly that you can't react, that's when we end up with more victims than we would. All right, so the Covenant School is one. Another one was the Sandy Hook school shooting. Now, in this instance, we know that the killer showed up to the school, went to the front door, which was locked because they practiced lockdown drills. They did all that stuff, but their glass was unprotected. And all the killer did was fire a couple rounds through the glass and it dropped. And the killer was in the school immediately and started attacking whoever they could find. And, they ended up killing many children and staff members. So in both of these instances, we see that unprotected glass is a huge problem. Because if you could slow that person down, even for 2 minutes, it buys you time to lock down, to flee, to call for help. In both of those instances, there was no time. The attack started, and within seconds, the killer was in the school using a firearm to kill innocent people. So when I talk about my sponsors all the time, right, I talk about my publisher, Blue 360 Media. They are an amazing publisher, and we're going into school safety and security stuff very soon. And then we have medicalessentialdiagnostics.com. They help anybody, teachers, staff members, anybody on the New Jersey state payroll, whether it's a state, county, or local town or whatever. They get two family members plus you over 18 to go and get a complete health screening at no cost to you. So I love them. The other one that I want to talk about right now are these guys, riottint.com, riottint.com, because it dovetails perfectly with what I'm talking about today, the glass, protecting your glass. So in the two instances that we talked about, where the killer walked up to the front door, because that's how they do it, they walk up to the front door and fired a couple of bullets and the glass dropped and they were in the building immediately. How does Riot Tint work? How does their window glazing work? And I call it glazing. There's other people call it, film, safety film, and this and that. And what I have found is that when I looked around, I found Riot Tint. That's why I asked them to sponsor the show, because I find their product to be amazing, their people to be amazing. But what it does for you, here's what it does. It buys you time. Time equals life. And the way this works, they come and they put this stuff on your door glass, your windows. They can put it on any kind of a window surface. And then they use a special caulking, which caulks the film and the glass to the frame of the window. Now, how this helps you. If I walk up with a hammer and you have unprotected glass and I smack it, it's going to drop. It's tempered glass. It falls to the ground and I step right in. I shoot it with a bullet. I step right in. When you put something on it, like the Riot Tint product, what happens is you can shoot through it. You'll put a bullet hole in it, but it's not going to drop. Do you get that? I can shoot through the glass, but the glass doesn't fall to the ground where I can then step through, get into your building and go hurt people. So what happens is, and there's videos of this, if you want to see it, I'll put some videos up when we do our equipment program. But the reality is, go look up riottint.com and go see their videos of people trying to shoot the glass out, and they fire dozens of rounds into this glass. They end up having to take a sledgehammer, try and knock the glass out of the door, right? That takes a guy my size. I'm a big guy. I'm 220 pounds. Throwing a 20-pound sledgehammer, it could take 1 to 2 to 3 minutes maybe to knock that glass out of the door. And in that 1 to 2 to 3 minutes, if somebody shot through the glass or they're bashing the glass, you're going to know you're under attack and you have time to respond. See what I'm saying? Time equals life. You see this happening and you have a couple of minutes to lock down, flee, call for help, get your people safe, right? So this is the value of this, and that's why they're one of our sponsors here. So controlling entry in and out and protecting your glass. Now, what I see a lot of schools do, they call me up, I'll come in, I'll do an assessment. And in every assessment, I tell them you have to protect your glass. So what they'll do is they'll budget for the first year to do the doors, the front doors, the glass, and the back door glass. And then the next year, they budget and they do the first floor windows. Then they do some classroom windows. It's an ongoing type of thing, but it provides you with an unbelievable layer of security that can save lives. So no matter what, even if they weren't my sponsor, I'm telling you, you have to get this safety glazing, this safety film on your doors and windows. It's probably the number one thing that's going to buy you time. Lock the door, only one way in and out, and cover it with safety film so that people can't just drop a couple rounds and get in your building and hurt you. All right, so remember that. Safety glazing, very important. This is Lieutenant Joe for Hope is Not a Tactic. And you know what they say, like the show, subscribe to the show, tell your friends about the show. We're here together. We're all in this together to help everybody be safe.